I need a pen.
So I was dying to ask you, and I Jim Forsyth, were you guys burned by James Keith's inadvertent email yesterday at 5:59 p.m. at Pittsburgh?
Excuse me, we'll start in 30 seconds. It gives you time to get up here. I know. It's networking. Network.
I think I'm good. Thank you.
She hasn't checked in yet, so.
Yeah, so we'll press that. Okay. And then I come up here. Is there going to be, what do you say right before?
I'm saying this.
Okay, right before I come up.
I'll introduce you. I'll say, I'll say, before we get started, I want to welcome Kari and Scott.
Oh, President
you'll
AWC. Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you
Wonderful.
just say, and now Scott, you can come forward. Huh? Oh, you hear me? All right. You didn't say anything bad.
Okay.
Good morning. Welcome to the 2015 Media Workshop for Nonprofits. Thank you all for being here this morning. For the first time, this workshop is co-sponsored by the Association for Women in Communication San Antonio Professional Chapter and the San Antonio Nonprofit Council as a training session for San Antonio's Big Give. My name is Ginger Hall Carnes. I am the immediate past president of AWC and chair of this year's workshop. There are 300 participants representing more than 200 organizations with us today. Our goal is to make you experts in communicating with the media, no matter what your cause or organization. The 2015 Media Guide will be available on the AWC website, which is awcsa.com, through Friday, May 15th. It's a perk of being at this workshop, and then we pull it down. The guide is full of tips and contacts, and we invite you to tweet about this workshop with the hashtag AWCSA Workshop, which also is on your program. Before we get started, I would like to welcome Kari Bridges, who's president of the San Antonio chapter of AWC, and Scott McAnish, Executive Director of the San Antonio Nonprofit Council.
Hi, good morning and welcome. It's so wonderful to see all of you here so early in the morning. So thank you so much for coming out and spending your morning with us. The Association for Women in Communications San Antonio Professional Chapter is more than 60 years old. We have a long tradition of working in the community, and putting on a workshop such as the Media Workshop for Nonprofits is just one way we do this. I encourage each of you to find out more about us and join if you can. We are currently having our spring membership drive through April 30th, and additional information about AWC is out in the entryway on the tables. We are currently seeking nominations for our annual Headliner Awards and accepting applications for the A.J. Castro Scholarship for Re-Entering Women. We honor community leaders in several categories with Headliner Awards, and those categories include education, volunteer service, professional achievement, public endeavor, and media excellence. Nominations are due this month, and you can find the nomination forms and applications on our website. One final note, I would like to thank Ginger Carnes for organizing and helping put on today's event, and all of our wonderful AWC volunteers. So if you could please stand at this time and be recognized. And it's been a joy to work with Scott McAnish of the San Antonio Nonprofit Council, who guides the training for the Big Give San Antonio. So Scott, I invite you to say a few words at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I am excited that we were able to partner with American Women in Communication to do this workshop and wrap it around the Big Give training schedule. I know most of you are participating in the Big Give this year, and those of you who may not be, registration is still open, and you can go to thebiggivesa.org, and registration actually closes on April 10th. So the sooner you get in, the more opportunity you have to attend these types of workshops. We have another workshop scheduled next Wednesday, the 25th, I think it's Wednesday, here at Oblate, and that is going to be another email marketing social media workshop. So I encourage you guys to attend those. We're also doing workshops in the Hill Country and in New Braunfels over the next 6 weeks leading up to May 5th. Another hashtag that you might want to use on your Twitter is hashtag BGSA2015. That's BGSA2015. And you can use that throughout the next 6 or 8 weeks as we lead up to May 5th. I would like to introduce a special guest of the Nonprofit Council and the Big Give, who has supported our efforts not only in year one, in our inaugural year, but has come back in year two in a very strong way. And I just wanted him to talk to you all about the participation and why their company is so invested in this community and in supporting this community-wide nonprofit effort. And I'd like to introduce Jared Skoke from the Tesoro Foundation.
Good morning. Thank you, Scott, for that kind introduction. I'm Jared Skoke, and I'm the Executive Director of the Tesoro Foundation. How many people in the room know of Tesoro? Okay, great. We've been around for 60 years. We're headquartered here in San Antonio, and for about 59 of those 60 years, we kind of kept our head in the sand. We were involved in the community, but we didn't really want to tell people what it is we did or who we supported. We didn't really have much of a strategy, so I came on board about 2 years ago and changed a lot of that. And we've grown our program and developed a mission statement, and if anyone's interested, they can go online at www.tsocorp.com and learn about it. We are a company that is committed to working and collaborating with our stakeholders to create cleaner, safer, well-educated communities where we operate. While we are a fairly large corporation, if you look at the Fortune 500 list, our profit margins are actually quite small. We operate in 19 states west of the Mississippi, and while my budget is about $10 million, it doesn't really go all that far. And so what we want to do is when we partner with organizations, we fund groups out in the community, we're looking at really impacting or moving the needle in a measurable way in 3 distinct areas. One is STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math. Not only are we an oil company, but I like to look at us as a petroleum company. You know, we have engineers and accountants and IT people. We have pipe fitters, welders, and all of that. So that's why we support STEM. We also support public safety, because safety is our first and foremost primary responsibility day in and day out. And then, of course, we look at environmental conservation and sustainable energy use. That said, that's where we want to move the needle. That's where 80% of our strategic dollars focus. That leaves 20% to try to do a lot of good with, but we know that that's just a drop in the bucket given the needs that exist not just here in San Antonio, but across all of our operating areas. So we look to leverage and stretch our dollars as best as possible, to look to influence and have collective impact. All of you in the room that are with nonprofits do a wonderful job, a great service to this community, and I applaud your efforts. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to fund every nonprofit in San Antonio. I don't think any funder, whether it's HEB or Valero or the private foundations that you see listed up on this stage, we'd love to, but we just can't. So we need to make some tough decisions. Well, for me, when I talked to Scott over a year ago about the Big Give, that was not a tough decision, okay? That is a wonderful effort in which we can work with the Nonprofit Council to fund the Big Give, to have collective impact, and so we take our investment and what we end up doing is impacting the entire sector. And so while we might not be able to fund your individual organizations, hopefully through this efforts, through the trainings and the technical support that's provided by the San Antonio Council, we're able to, I guess through a surrogate, if you will, help your organizations. And not just for that 24-hour giving period, right? The skills that Scott and his team try to transfer onto you and to your teams is not just for that 24-hour period, but it is something that you can use to donor cultivate year-round. And one of the things that we like about this, not only the collective impact that it has, but it also has some great measurable goals and outcomes. We can see every year with our investment how much collectively is raised, how many people go through the trainings. They do some kind of pre-test, post-test a little bit, so we can see the knowledge gain, but they also do follow-up. So we see what you take away from this and how you implement it year-round. So it's, when I have to go to my executives and say, this is what I want to invest in, we've got some great data to show them. And hint, hint to your organizations, if you apply to us, we are a data-driven engineering-based company. So we like to see those types of things in grant proposals. But last, but certainly not least, we are in a changing world, demographically speaking. The Department of Labor talks about the retirement and the baby boomers. In this day and age, you have 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day. Every day. That's an amazing number of people leaving the workforce and leaving traditional, I think, giving campaigns. And what they're being replaced by, of course, are the millennials, the new generation, the technology-driven individuals that like to have choice. They like to have lots of different options. And the Big Give is a great way that we can share with our younger workforce ways that they can get in the community, the ways that they can give back that are important to them. And so wanting to be an employer of choice and helping us recruit and retain individuals, this is a great way that we can help our employees give back. And coupled with our matching gift program, where we will match their donations dollar for dollar up to $1,500 per year to just about any nonprofit or K-12 school, or dollar for dollar up to $5,000 per year for 2- and 4-year colleges and universities, this is a wonderful tool. So I just want to thank Scott and for this opportunity to address you all. We're very supportive, we're very excited, and we're glad to be back and part of the Big Give. We hope you get excited as well. We've got a dynamic panel up here for you this morning, and I will be around afterwards in case anyone has any questions. So thank you again and enjoy the morning.
Okay, a couple housekeeping items. You are welcome to get food during the event. Is this an awesome display of food out here? And the restrooms are down that hallway, so if you need to use those. Now, let me introduce you to our moderator who will take over the show. Kim Fox is a senior lecturer and the journalism sequence coordinator at Texas State University. Kim was one of my colleagues at the San Antonio Express-News, where she covered courts and legal affairs before being promoted to deputy metro editor. She won awards for her coverage of child abuse and juvenile justice and state honors for news and feature writing. She joined the Texas State University faculty in 2002 and twice won the university's highest award for teaching and service, the Presidential Excellence Award. She recently completed 2 terms on the national board of the Society of Professional Journalists and remains a member of the SPJ National Education Committee. She's even done a little PR during a 10-year stint as a board member on the Bernie Education Foundation. She's been serving as our moderator for years, and we are grateful to have her with us again. Kim Fox.
Thanks, Ginger, and thank all of you for being here today. I trust that you will get much from this event, and one of the ways that you will get much from this event is you've got a card, or you should all have cards with you, and so as you go through and listen to our panelists, if you would write questions or a question on the card, we'll be collecting those and having a question and answer period after the break, near the end of the program. So feel free to do that as we go. And that way we can collect them as we go too and sort of get focused on what questions you have. All right? We're good? What we're going to do is we're going to go down the panel. We'll do half before our break, and no fear, you will get a break so you can eat some more and do that other stuff you need to do. And then we'll finish with the second half of the panel. And I'll introduce one panelist and let her speak, and then we'll go from there, if that'll work for you guys. And if that'll work for you guys, all right. Well, we're going to start with Bernice Kearney. Right, Bernice has for more than 25 years worked in television news, collaborating with team members to bring stories of South Texas alive on TV. And as we all know, we don't just work in one medium, so on TV, online, on mobile, and on the station's social media. So we do everything. Her journey started in 1988 when she began interning at Ken's TV, a testament to how we're all sort of related. She was at St. Mary's University then, and then she became a producer for Ken's for the morning show and produced newscasts for Ken's for 4 years. She left there to take over the 10 p.m. producer spot at KSAT 12. At her core, Bernie is a producer, which in TV parlance is really being a writer and a storyteller. So she thinks about news and information as the stories journalists tell, the personal stories that they tell. It's all about the people. Bernie grew into the business. She moved into leadership. She's been in management roles at KSAT, first as a senior producer, then as executive producer, and she became news director, which is the highest ranking position in the news operation at KSAT just this last year. So Bernie is the news director. She's responsible for outlining the newsroom's vision, strategic plan, putting in place all of their goals. It's a big picture position, but she does have an overall view of how TV newsrooms work. Bernice has spent time as a freelance writer, specializing in writing about the community's nonprofit organizations as well, so she's got some background similar to yours. And through that work, she learned more about the organizations and the people who work with them. She says, people who make this community a better place to live, work, and raise families. So Bernie, tell us a little bit about TV news. Yep, and use the microphone. Is it? Oh, but you're a TV person. You know all about microphones. So. Let's see.
Can you hear me? Perfect. Thank you for having me here today. Kim pretty much basically outlined my resume, and when I hear it, I'm like, oh gosh, I've been doing this since 1988. What? How's that possible? But I do, it's something that I've grown to love, the media and our role in our communities. And it's something that I take very seriously, personally and professionally. As Kim mentioned, one of the things that I've gotten into in the last few years, I started doing some freelance writing for a woman named Kathy McNaughton, who some of you may know. And when she was doing her consulting work, I would write about nonprofit organizations for her newsletter, and it gave me a very different perspective on our community because I really got to know on a granular level some of the really wonderful work and mission that your organizations have in our community. So that interest has somewhat dovetailed with what I do for our station as news director, because we try to tell those personal stories. It's not just about crime and fires and wrecks and all of that. So we do try to tell those personal stories, and just in the last year, our station has started an initiative called KSAT Community, which we've partnered with Corner Store Security Service and University Health Systems to do outreach in our communities, and we're actually partnering with the Big Give this year, so we're really excited because we're going to get to bring a lot of those stories alive for our viewers and our mobile users and our website readers and our social media followers. So it's all kind of come together for us and for me today. I was asked to talk a little bit about kind of how my day goes, and so far today I've received almost 50 emails, and it's like not even 9 o'clock. That is my day. I probably receive 600 to 700 emails a day, all directed specifically to me. That doesn't include any lists that I'm on that people send emails to for, all the newsroom or all the station or all the reporters or all the producers or whatever. And my point in saying that is, as a nonprofit organization, you have to get through the clutter. And there's a lot of clutter, and I see a lot of nodding heads. There's a lot of clutter. And I mean, some of those emails are just from my boss, and I have to look at those. So, one of the things that I've realized in San Antonio and working in the news, and definitely when I was starting to work on writing different nonprofit stories for Kathy, was it's all about relationships. And that's true for anything. It's all about relationships. And that is true for your relationship with the media. Just like no one in this room would go up to Jared at Valero, never having met him, stick your hand out and say, "Can you give me $50,000? Because you don't have a relationship. Those kinds of asks are built over time. And as a member of the media, we get a lot of asks every day from people who've not bothered to build a relationship with us. And I'm not talking about spending 6 months taking me to coffee and doing all of that, but having a sense of what we do, the services that we provide, and we do provide a service to our community, and how you can work with us to get your message out in an effective way. That's a relationship that's worth building with me, with anybody on this panel. So, don't be one of the 700 emails that I get that doesn't explain what you want, who you are, what your event is. I mean, I get emails that say, "Here's this great event, see the attached." Oh my gosh, so I have to open an attachment that may or may not work, and it may not have as much information as I want. These are kinds of things that I guess we can talk about a little bit later on, but there's a lot that you have to do to help me help you. And that goes for the television side, that goes for the website side, that goes for the social side. There's a lot that you can do to get your message out, whether it's on my TV newscast, which, let me just say, for the most part, no one in this room wants to be the lead story on my newscast. It's not a good deal, right? But there's a place for your story or the work that you do somewhere on our platforms. If you have a great event and you have some cool pictures of, the cute little guide dogs that are graduating from guide dog class, send us a few pictures and some captions. We can build a slideshow and put that on our Facebook page, put it on our website, link to your website. tag your organization on Facebook, send out a tweet about it. That's valuable. That's valuable in a world of 24/7, connected all the time, people, doing this. That's a value. So don't discount those things that you can do that you're already doing probably for your organization that can be great viral type of content that we can share, other people can share, you can share. So that's sort of mine.
Okay, that sounds good. And we'll put you down as no attachments, right? You're on the no attachments. Okay. I know that's going to be a question, so we'll see how we go through it. So next up, we have Melissa Fletcher-Stolce. Melissa has been a newspaper reporter for almost 30 years. She worked previously as a feature writer at the San Antonio Light, may it rest its soul, and the Houston Chronicle. She's been working in San Antonio for over a decade, for the past several years covering social services for the San Antonio Express News. Her beat encompasses all sorts of topics: child abuse, poverty, mental illness, and homelessness, among them, including, of course, many nonprofits in that world. She covers the work of nonprofits and considers herself in a position to give a voice to those who would otherwise be marginalized or disenfranchised. Part of her claim to fame, as some of you know, is her family. She's the daughter of Ginger Purdy, a revered founder of networking in San Antonio and a member of AWC, and a role model for Melissa and countless other women in San Antonio as well. She's married to Mark Stolce, who is executive director of a nonprofit called San Antonio Clubhouse, so she lives with you in her home. That organization rehabilitates people diagnosed with severe and persistent mental illness. So Melissa, tell us about the Express News.
Okay, is it on? So yes, I cover social services, like Kim was saying. Really, it's any marginalized population that also gets government funding or gets involved with a government entity. Child abuse, homelessness, mental illness, poverty. It's not a happy little beat, but it's an important one, I think. I feel very, very grateful that I'm able to give voice to these folks that are otherwise ignored, and my goal is to have somebody reading the paper, eating their cornflakes, to walk in somebody else's shoes for even just a moment. So my goal is to put the human face on the news. So one thing you can do for me that would help you get your story in the paper is when you call me, tell me a compelling human story. I'm just looking for a good story to bring to my editor. And one way to do that is have people already kind of lined up, like clients of your nonprofit that tell the story through an actual person. That they've already signed a release or said they could be photographed. So I'm not just interviewing like the executive director. Real people, real human stories. That's my bread and butter. Because I'm writing about abstract issues, homelessness, mental illness. Those are huge abstract issues. If I can find the thread, the human thread in there to tell that story, and anything you can do to make my job easier, I would recommend you do that. Because we're all very busy. I get a lot of emails too. We all get a lot of pitches. If I have the one where the human story is up high, there's an actual person to write about, that's going to pique my interest and have me call you back or respond to your email. Don't make me work too hard to get to that. Like we're talking about who, what, where, when, very early on. I think I submitted some press releases to show on the big screen from the city of San Antonio did.
Looks like
Is that
we've got
later?
action going, so we'll see. Keep going and we'll see how it
Okay, and make it really clear who the contact person is and their phone number. Do your research before you submit. Like if we did a story about your nonprofit 2 years ago, 4 years ago, we're probably not going to revisit it unless there's some new initiative or new program, a new angle on something we've already written about.
And we do have
Okay, so here we go. You'll see the city of San Antonio, they do a really good job with their press releases. You'll see there's a contact person and a phone number, and then just very they get to the point early on. I don't have to read through 5, 6, 7 paragraphs to find out why you're pitching me. So, make it easier for me. Avoid those sort of month of pitches, national, hearing aid month or whatever. We've gotten kind of resistant to those. And I'm not saying we don't do stories that are based on certain, month of, but we kind of avoid them. Let me see. If there's something happening in the national realm that relates to your nonprofit or your issue, we're always trying to localize stories. So that's a really good way to get my attention. This just happened, whether it's a school shooting or a national food stamps issue. I always want to localize those kind of stories. So keep your, be watching other media always, TV and radio. Follow up with a phone call. I sometimes drop emails because I get lots of them. So if you haven't heard from me for, several days or a week, just give me a call or send the email again. And again, don't send stuff too far in advance, because then it kind of drops off the radar too. Like, you don't want to send an email a month before an event or a story, but you don't want to send it like the day of either, but 2 weeks, a week beforehand. I do prefer emails and photos. Sure, most of the time the Express News wants to take their own photos, but if you have a photo that might help sell the story, be sure and attach that with your email. Always looking for news stories, like new, something that we haven't been written about. Do some homework on any kind of statistics or anything that's a fact that you could include in your pitch to catch my eye, like, there's 50% more of this or 20% more of that. Statistics and any kind of factual information helps me go to my editor and say, here's why we should do this story. We don't typically cover, I know nonprofits often do luncheons and galas to raise money. We don't typically cover those anymore unless you bring in like a nationally recognized speaker. Then we will do that story. We also don't do stories about donations these days unless it's $1 million or more. We will do briefs if it's like, underneath that, but really today for a full-blown story, it's got to be $1 million or up. Okay. I think that was about it. Thank you.
So Melissa, let me ask you a quick question though. When you talk about local news, doing a localization of a national issue, like something happens, how immediate do you need that to be?
The day before.
Okay, so
yeah.
So it's not like you can think of, in a week I'll get to you and tell you this is related to something that happened last week.
Yeah, strike while the iron's hot. We are a daily paper, and we got to move on a dime. Some of my stories I'll spend weeks on. Like I recently had a story about the fact that there's lots of seniors living in high-rises with no sprinklers, and of course that was off the whole Wedgwood tragedy. So I spent maybe 3 weeks on that story, but I do a lot of stories. I just turn it around in a day. So the quicker you can hit me up, the better.
And just a quick press release, right, or a quick email that says, hey, we've got an expert on this, right? It doesn't have to be very formed,
yeah.
right, for both of you. Good.
Exactly.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, we will ask all of them more questions. I'll try to keep mine down because I just have lots of questions all the time. So our next guest is Jim Forsythe. So Jim has been the news director of WOAI AM, the highest rated AM and highest rated news talk radio station in Texas since 1987. You've heard him on Reuters News Service, CBS Radio, Fox News Radio, as well as the Texas State Network as a correspondent. He graduated from Indiana University with a degree in economics and has worked in television, newspapers, and broadcast news as a consultant. He's the consummate newsman, named the best reporter in Texas 3 years in a row by the Associated Press, and twice won the top national award for reporting from the Radio Television News Directors Association. And he was one of the founders of the Communication Arts High School in Northside, which many good journalism students have come from. So Jim, tell us about radio.
Thank you very much. This is a very, very august gathering, and I'd like to thank the Sand Council and Ginger for inviting me to this. This is a very interesting panel. I'd also like to thank Kim, who is undoubtedly one of the finest journalists I've ever had the pleasure of working with, and I'm not surprised that she won the President's Award. I'm sure she'll win many more. Radio today is not the radio that I started in way back in the late 1970s after I left my Ron Burgundy television days behind. And I did have hair, and I did have a big bushy mustache. We are now, as Bernice mentioned well, we're now multimedia. I have a photojournalist working for me. We do online material, video material, as well as audio material, and obviously we do print material as well on the website, so it is a multimedia presentation. So yes, the radio's in our name, but it's also video, it's also print, just like everybody else in 2015 deals with that. Talking about obtaining coverage, the one thing I would suggest is that you learn to understand the rhythms and the outlook and the operation of the medium that you are pitching to, kind of learn who the key people are, learn when they are looking for material, learn when they have their up times, when they have their down times. I'll give you a perfect example. I love Acme brick. My house is made of Acme brick, but
at about 8:47 a.m. on September 11th, 2001, just as the second plane was crashing into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. My phone rings, and it's a public relations person from Acme Brick wanting me to do a story that one of their executives just got promoted. So if you're going to pitch a story, maybe don't pitch it during 9/11. Understand what's happening around the community. If there's something major that's going on, the newsroom is probably, especially today when newsrooms are generally smaller, the newsroom is probably pretty tied up and probably pretty busy. Wait for a time when things are kind of slow. Be aware of what they're doing. Know the people who you want to talk to. Wouldn't be a bad idea to go to the websites and find out who the key people are in the operation. If it's the news director, if it's the executive producer, it's the assignment editor. Maybe establish relationships with them. Maybe make sure they know who you are. And make sure that you're putting your pitch in at a time when they have time and energy to talk to you. Learn, for example, what are the slow times in that medium. Monday morning, Friday afternoon, we're always looking for material for the weekend. It's probably different in Channel 12. It's probably different at the Express News. Kind of learn when people might be interested in feature-ish kind of stories, when people might be actually looking for good, solid material. If it's the week before Thanksgiving week, maybe, the news media would be more open to what you're pitching because we've got kind of slow days coming up and we're gonna need to fill them. This goes along with one thing I thought Melissa said very well. Try to get a hook to get attention. Don't send a passive news release or an email. Don't send something that says an event is happening, okay? Try to come up with a hook. It's the first, it's the biggest, it's the largest we've ever done. Something that makes it newsworthy, because what I like to say to people is that the definition of news is that which is unusual or previously unknown. So you've got to be kind of either unusual or something you've done has not been done before, it's previously unknown, to have that hook that's going to get the news media interested. You're just not having an event, but you're having an event in which is going to bring together such and such important people. We have the founder of Meals on Wheels. We have statistics we can give you. We have something that is significant other than the fact that the event occurs, because then the media can use the hook to kind of back into the event. So you've sold your event on the basis of the fact that, did you realize they stacked 1 million dominoes today? Well, it was a fundraiser for, and here's the executive director of, and so you can kind of back into it that way. And it gives it a hook, it makes it an interesting picture, it makes it an interesting soundbite, and then you've gotten your story told by pitching something that is realistically something other than your story. But that, works very, very well. Be proactive. And there's a wonderful example today. We have had, yesterday, we had 2 women murdered in domestic violence incidents by their husbands in their own homes. If you are with a domestic violence group, shame on you. I mean, get a hold of the news departments. Domestic violence is a hot issue right now. Our executive director, our president, is an expert on domestic violence, could talk about why these things happen, how we can prevent them. Be aware of what's in the news, and if you're associated with that event through your nonprofit, use your people as resources. And you have some amazing, smart people in your agencies and organizations who can provide insight into this horrible, spike in domestic violence, or some sort of tragedy that's happened someplace else. Our executive director once took, 15 tons of supplies to Zimbabwe, and can talk about, the tragedy that just happened in Central Africa. See, that kind of thing. Be aware of how you can provide an asset, you can provide a part of a breaking news story, and that can sell your organization, not only that you exist, but also that you are the home of experts, that you are the home of smart people who are recognized as being the leaders in this area. That makes you a lot more likely to get people who want to donate to you if they know that your executive director or your president or your operations director is somebody who's quoted by the media as an expert in breaking news. I mean, that shows that you guys are special, you're important, you're worth donating to. Be available when you send out a news release, and I didn't get the message about putting them on zip drives, but I do have some news releases here, and I'll put them out if you want to look at them, examples of good news releases. If you put out a news release, be available, and not just the person who put out the news release, but have somebody available who can talk to us. If it's your executive director or president or CEO or something who is the person who talks to the media, if you're putting out a release or you're doing a pitch, make sure that that person is available now. What I like to say is the radio is at the beginning of the news food chain. We don't, with maybe the history of the world at the other end, maybe television, newspapers, he goes on. We don't do broad coverage. We don't do in-depth coverage. Our sound bites can be no longer than 11 seconds, but we need things right away. So if you do send out a pitch or if you do send me a release saying, so-and-so can talk to you about domestic violence, I'm not interested in tomorrow, really. I mean, I'm interested in now. So make sure that, the person who's going to be available is there and can talk to me and is trained to deal with the media. And that's an important point as well. Try to obtain some media training. Try to obtain, work with your CEOs, work with your general managers, work with whoever it is who's going to talk to the media to get them acclimated to what that's like so they can take full advantage of that opportunity when it comes up. I mean, it's not going to do you any good if it's and somebody who isn't really focused. Make sure that the people who are going to be talking to the media are trained, know what's needed in order to be a good TV interviewee or a radio interviewee or a newspaper interview. They're all three different types of events that require three different skill sets. And if you and the people who you work for don't know that, you need to be trained in that. So, now be accessible, understand the rhythm of the media that you're talking to, tailor your pitches directly to that media, understand what they want, understand what they don't want and what they're not interested in, understand what their times are. I mean, Bernice's times and the rhythm of her newsroom, my prime time is between 5 and 9 in the morning. Her prime time is, is early evening and late evening. Understand things like that. Understand what people are working for and understand how the news media works and understand that sometimes you don't send the same pitch to everybody. Sometimes you personalize it to different groups. And we can go in depth into any of those things as we talk later on.
Great, thanks, Jim. So we were gonna do John after the break, but actually we're doing really well, and that means that I hope you're writing down lots of questions. So I think we're gonna get to John before the break, and so do write down questions so we can collect a lot of those during the break. So let me introduce you to John. John Burnham. Sorry, I should say his last name. I just know him as John. John is an independent nonprofit consultant and freelance writer who works for agencies on deploying integrated approaches to marketing, development, and data analysis. He's currently acting as a coordinating consultant for the Big Give SA. He's also marketing director for San Antonio Christian Dental Clinic and the COO of the Louise H. Batts Patient Safety Foundation, so he's a little busy. He has a BA in Art History and Classical Mediterranean Studies from Trinity University and a Master's of Theological Studies from Vanderbilt. He is a San Antonio native who lives downtown with his wife, Nikki, and the real reason he's busy is they also have a 5-month-old daughter, Sophia. So John really spends any spare time he has changing diapers and ferrying Sophie all over the place, which could not be more fun, right? Really, that probably tops all the other jobs he has. So John, tell us about nonprofits and how they can access all these people. Yeah. Or you can just take this microphone and that'll work.
Cool. Sounds good. And then also have some slides here in a second. So first I'd like to. Is this not on?
This one's. Oh, this one's on. Here we go. The third one's the charm. First, I'd like to ask a couple questions. How many of you have a PR marketing professional, or public relations professional on staff? Raise your hand. So we're looking at maybe a quarter of the room. How many of you have written a press release in the last year to one of the news sources up here? A good number of you. Still looking at maybe a little half, maybe over half. How many of you sent out a tweet or a Facebook post in the last week? Okay. So I think it's important to frame this because I think it ties right into what we've heard earlier, which is, you heard 600 emails a day going out, right? And I'm sure it's probably equivalent for all of you. You're all receiving tons and tons of information daily, right? We live in a world of information, a world of news. There's roughly 4.5 quintillion bytes of information that are passed every single minute on the internet. That amounts to 350,000 tweets a minute. That amounts to half a million tweets a day. And 200 billion tweets a year. When Twitter was established in 2006, and the first tweet was sent out in 2006, it took it 3 years to get to 1 billion tweets. It gets to 1 billion tweets in 2 days now. And Twitter isn't even the primary vehicle for most people when they look for information. People go to Facebook, people go to LinkedIn, people go to Pinterest. There are bloggers. There's Foursquare. There's Yik Yak. There's Vine. There's any number of different opportunities out there for you to leverage. And the important thing about these media sources are that they're new. They have people actively engaging on them all the time. I've had, thanks to those hashtags you guys gave out, I've had like 50 push notifications since I've been sitting here from people who have tweeted out and this thing alone that I now have to respond to afterwards. So thank you for making my job harder. So I think it's important when we have a conversation about this to realize that there's ultimately always reason to go to, I mean, these are vetted sources. These are people who are experts in what they do. There was a survey that I recently read that said roughly 45% of people, when polled, would say that they mostly or completely trust a traditional media source. So it's vetted, it's good, and those are great numbers. Whereas only 15% would suggest that they mostly or completely trust something they found through social media. However, 7 through 10 people under the age of 30 get their news source primarily through social media. They got news in the last week. 6 out of 10 between the ages of 30 and 39, 4 out of 10 when you go up into the 50s, and then it only goes to about 20% beyond that. But that's still 20% of a population that most people don't assume are using Twitter, or using Facebook, or using LinkedIn, or using et cetera. If you look at this chart up here, you can see the number of Americans using each sort of device, so television, laptop, radio, cell phone. They're all way up here, and this is to get news sources. So you even have over 50% of the population is using their cell phone now to get news sources. So that means it has to be quick. It has to happen now, and it has to happen immediately. And so it's important to think about this, that we live in a world in which people are on average getting their news from 4 to 5 sources. You know, if you look at sort of a broad range of topics, people are going to ESPN for sports. Maybe they're going to Bleacher Report. Maybe they're doing something else. But they have one. They have their place. They're going to maybe the Atlantic for, or the Huffington Post for human interest pieces, right? Maybe they're getting news about international affairs from the New York Times. Maybe they're getting it through social media because it's happening right now from the actual reporter or the actual UN investigator in the field. These are things we didn't have access to 5 years ago, but yet they're all opportunities, they're all influencers that you can tap into and use when you don't have the opportunity, when you don't have the opportunity or the time or the speed to get to one of these traditional outlets. And these groups are influencers as well. You know, I was just looking up while they were talking what kind of followers they have on social media. KSAT has 50,000 followers on social media. WAI Radio has 9,000. Univision, the local Univision, has 5,200. So, I mean, these are all people that if you can't reach them directly, you have an opportunity to reach out indirectly through social media outlets. I think this will go next. Yeah. So first I wanted to sort of talk about a couple different options you have. If you look up here, this is the listing for joining the conversation at the Rivard Report. It's just one of a handful of sort of news, online-only news sources you have here in town, and I certainly didn't want to talk about anything you guys would be talking about up here, so I only excluded your sort of postings for this reason. But this is clear and concise. It says, you know, if you do want to submit a human interest piece, it tells you 800 to 1,200 words, text document attached in the email, and then there's rules for pictures that you're sending. Rule number 1, and I think just to reiterate, is follow the rules. Like, this is big, right? I mean, even when I'm dealing with nonprofits and we're asking for something to post on Facebook, we're asking to sort of amplify your message, I'm very specific. I say I want 150 words and a picture attached in the email. If I get a PDF, I'm deleting it. If I get a link to send to your website to download photos, I'm deleting it. And this happens repeatedly. So really follow the rules, really know exactly what they're referring to, when, what, how, all the details you need. The other really big thing I wanted to get into, and we can dive into this more during questions, is influencers. So I mentioned them a little bit earlier. You have opportunities to reach out to UN investigators. You have the opportunity to reach out to a social media expert in your field. You have an opportunity to tap into somebody who knows your content extremely well and likely has a blog and writes on it on a regular basis. And I'll give an example. When I work with an organization, the BATS Foundation, we produce materials that patients can use in the hospital to navigate the hospital system and reduce adverse events that occur. About, I think, 2 years ago, we put an article out in the Rivard Report, and a guy named Mark Graben, who will also be a speaker here in the next month or so, he'll be one of our panelists talking about this issue in more detail. Mark found it because he has sorts of things that he aggregates where news is coming from. And Mark is a major influencer in his field. So we began the conversation with Mark. We didn't say, hey, Mark, we want you to post something immediately. Mark started talking to us. We met with him. We had conversations and slowly moved into how we got involved. And Mark is an individual whose blog is read by over 3,000 people every single day. Mark is listed as one of the top 100 influencers on LinkedIn. This is with people like T. Boone Pickens and other major players in the LinkedIn field. And so when we got to the point where we had developed this relationship enough, Mark wrote an article about the Bats Foundation. And that blog alone, external from any of these major news sources, drove traffic to our website 20-fold for that day. So people are finding different individuals, different resources, different outlets to reach out. And so your job is to identify who that person is, who is that Mark in your field. You know, I think about the Big Give SA. One of the workshops we'll be hosting in August of this next year coming up is with a lady named Beth Cantor. And I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Beth, but Beth has widened our horizons beyond San Antonio so much. Beth has 405,000 followers on Twitter. Beth is a major influencer on LinkedIn. Beth is super connected to sort of everything that's happening in the social media marketing field within nonprofits. And she's now following us. She's now sharing our information. And that amplifies our message tremendously. And we have to reach out to her in some sense in the same way we would traditional outlets. But at the same time, you have other tools available to you. You know, you can build relationships, you can make personal contacts, and you can really look for the person or the people that are most directly connected to what you're doing. Up here, you see a sort of a list when you're thinking about influencers, and we can pass this information on later on about what kind of influencer are you looking for, because that's important too. You know, maybe a Mark Graban is great, but Mark Graban's not great for somebody who's doing something on domestic violence. Mark Graban's great for somebody who's doing something in healthcare. Maybe Beth Cantor's great, but she's not great for, you know, covering dog parks or something. You know, you have to really kind of know who you're going after and be specific, and don't just immediately ask them. I see this all the time on Twitter where somebody will post a message and say, hey, retweet me, or hey, do this, or hey, do that. That's not a relationship. That's not building anything. That's not driving anybody to your content. What you need to do is follow them, read their blog, comment, share, help them amplify their message, and then in turn you can start that relationship that will then allow you to amplify your message. And then you need to identify whether the time period relies on a socializer, a networker, someone who spreads the word, or whether you need an expert, somebody in the field, like you're presenting data, and you need somebody in the field who can verify what you're doing and put their sort of stamp of approval on that. These are different kinds of people, but these are all people who have access to that you didn't directly before. So this is a whole other element of doing your research, and this does not require a press release. This requires you building relationships, doing what you do on social media, and really utilizing some of the tools that are available, which we can get into in the Q&A later on, that'll help you find, identify, and tap into those resources. Another thing you have at your disposal is your opportunity to curate your own content now. How many of you have heard the word or are irritated by the word storytelling? Because it happens all the time. We talk about it in nonprofits continuously, right? So storytelling is only a small fraction of what you have available to you. Obviously, you need a great story. You need something catchy to present to anybody. But this is an image from a thing called Rebel Mouse, and there are tons of things like this. Scoop it, pin it. I mean, there's all sorts of things. And what this does is it'll aggregate your social media stuff for you and integrate it onto your website, all for free, so you don't have to pay money. The dreaded dollar is not going to turn you away from this. And it'll allow people to see what you're doing and start making you your own expert. People then view your site. They know what you're posting. They know what you're reading. They know who you're following. So not only are you spreading that person's information, but you're also starting to develop your own image, your own self-identity into what you can provide to the community. So people can come to you for news on their own. And really, lastly, what I want to say before the Q&A is follow the rules. Follow the rules. So this is just kind of an example. I thought about this yesterday. This is a last-minute edition. This has nothing to do with nonprofits, but I thought it was funny. My wife was talking to me, and she was going through Facebook, and a friend of hers tagged her in this. It was something for a business who was leveraging social media in a great way. You see that they have 15,000 people have liked it, 5,200 shares for this image, and the idea was that you tag somebody else's name with the message, and then and it enters you basically for a chance to win this object here, this baby carrier. And so there were a lot of people who obviously wanted the baby carrier. And I think it's funny that if you then go to this slide, you look down the list and you see a person who's just posting a picture of their baby. And if you went through this, you would see like there are hundreds and hundreds of people who just posted pictures of their baby and said, this is why I need this. It didn't follow the rules. And then the person right below them says, I'm not sure if I'm reading this wrong, but to enter I must tag friends. I see a lot of cute baby pictures, but none of those people tag friends. And so they automatically, by not reading one sentence, they automatically excluded themselves from a wonderful opportunity. And when you don't do that with influencers, when you don't do that with your own news sources, and when you don't do that with the experts on this panel, you're also limiting yourself. Thank you.
Very good. All right, well, we're going to take a break, actually. Let me check the time. You know what? Where's Ginger? Where did Ginger go? Ginger, do you want to just go with our next panelist and then? Okay, let's do that. Let's do that. So if you were thinking about jumping up to get food, you can still do that while we're talking. It's okay. You can't do the other stuff, though. Don't leave yet. Okay, so our next panelist, we were, not that we don't love him, but we invited Mona Ramirez. So if you were looking for the news director of KWEX, she was called away on a family emergency. So we are glad that she sent Gonzalo Magana, and he is the executive producer at KWEX TV and their beautiful new studios out there in the northwest part of town. They are a Univision affiliate in San Antonio. He joined KWEX in May of 2012. Prior to his arrival in San Antonio, he produced and did assignments at Univision's affiliate in Sacramento, California. He's a native of Mexico. He immigrated to the U.S. at age 9 and was raised in Watsonville. That's a small community in California. And his career in broadcasting actually began while he was still in college. So let's hear it for internships. He was an intern as a college student in 2005, and then 9 months later, he was hired for a full-time position as the assignments editor while still in school. So he was really working there towards those last years in school. He graduated from Sacramento State in 2007 with a degree in public relations and a minor in Spanish. He's a member of the San Antonio Association of Hispanic Journalists and the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. And he's had 5 Emmy Awards, 4 of them in California, and the most recent one in Texas in 2013. So congrats on that. Gonzalo was promoted to executive producer at KWEX in March of last year, and he oversees and manages their news team and the editorial content across all of their platforms. As we've been talking, everybody's working across all platforms here. So Gonzalo, tell us about your TV world.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I think this is a very interesting conversation that it's going to benefit both you guys and us. As all my colleagues can relate, we're all coming from shrinking newsrooms. We all have to wear many hats every day. One day it may be in a newsroom, picking up your phone call or answering to your press release, and the next day I may be out in the field, producing a story. So just know that timing it's key. Knowing who you are trying to reach, knowing the audience that they reach, it's very, very important. In my situation, I come from a very different medium than all my colleagues, and in particular in San Antonio, which happens to be one of the most bilingual communities in the country. It's even I have to do a mental adjustment as well, coming from California, where my stories were directly towards people that only spoke Spanish, and their English was very limited. Here, I'm having to compete against all my colleagues here because I know that my audience, my viewers, can switch from one channel to the other and understand both languages perfectly well. So in my situation, we're having to adjust and tweak our stories to make sure that we're attracting all sorts of viewers. And Univision, coming from, like I said, shrinking newsrooms, we're having to produce more with less, which means that your story can also make it to all of our markets. We, on a regular basis, share our content with not only our Texas affiliates, but all across the country. We have what's called the Daybook that just comes within all of our affiliates. So on a regular basis, I know what each market is producing, and if it's a topic of interest that I can use here, I will use it, and they will use it as well. So also keep that in mind when you're pitching stories. If it's a generic topic, or if it's something that another market can run, the likelihood of that happening, it's very high. Not only will it make it on there, but it will make it on their social media, it will make it on their online. So the message will get across to more people. Keep that in mind. Obviously, social media is of importance, like all my colleagues just discussed. It's also important for you to know what kind of social media followers they have. For example, my strong followers are not on Twitter yet. My strong followers are on Facebook. I have over 45,000 followers on Facebook versus the 5,200 on Twitter. So knowing what kind of followers they have, it's also important because that will help you kind of tweak the message. And most of my colleagues come from bigger newsrooms where they have a social media department, they have an online department, they have, I come from a smaller newsroom where I do my own social media. My assignment is that, the social media. It's a team effort. I don't have a social media department yet. We're a little behind in that area, and so just kind of know that as well. One day I'm producing a newscast. You know, that day I may be producing a newscast, doing executive producer duties, and also going out to the field. So timing, it's the most important thing for you guys to realize. And so if you're trying to get maybe a hold of a news director or a executive producer, maybe it's better that you reach out to the staff editor. So getting to know who works in that newsroom and what they do will really help you get that message across. I think, you know, those are some of the stronger things that I wanted to focus on, but we'll continue the conversation. I'm sure things will come up.
Okay, well, first, let us thank our panelists for getting through all of this. So this is what I would like from you. If you would write some questions on those index cards, we're going to have people going around and picking them up, so you'll see them standing around with cards. So do give your cards to our volunteers, and we will come back at 10 o'clock. Ginger, are you good with that? 10 o'clock, so it's like 9:42. So we will be back in here at 10 o'clock. Let's aim for that. I know there may be a line at some of the facilities. So come back in here at 10 o'clock, and we will do questions and answers. You don't want to miss that. You get a break, too. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
Hi, I'm Steve with the Hope for the Future. We're working with Roland and Moana for our telethon coming up in April.
Oh, okay, cool.
We're having it at the studio there, and you guys are helping us.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
It'd be fun. I appreciate to open up the studio. It's awesome. Gorgeous studio, and it's been very accommodating. So.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Thanks for sharing the support with us. Take care.
Soy de Michoacán.
Ah, de Michoacán, yo soy de Monterrey.
Ah, qué padre.
Sí.
Hay mucha gente de
Sí, ya sé, pero ahorita que dijeron de que sí, de México, yo, mira, es paisano.
Es paisano, sí.
Oye, yo me llamo Lucía, mucho gusto. Trabajo en una non-profit llamada MAS, Mexicans and Americans Thinking Together.
¿Oh?
Sí, sí, está aquí en San Antonio, es una non-profit que lo que trata de hacer es tratar de hacer un puente de entendimiento entre Estados Unidos y México. Y tenemos varios programas, y hay uno de que, son 4 programas, por ejemplo, el primero es Yo Soy México, que ayuda a integrar a los inmigrantes, pero integrarlos en México en un trabajo, darles oportunidad de trabajo. Sí, y estamos en varios módulos de deportación de border, estamos como en 3. Sí, déjame darte la mía, para que nos pongamos de acuerdo y lo que sea. Y tenemos varios programas, te digo, también por ejemplo tenemos el programa Más Maestro en Casa, que es aquí en Estados Unidos, de hecho, que ayuda a integrar a los inmigrantes, porque los que no se sienten Gracias, mucho.
Which ones did you, yeah, kind of determining what needs to go to who, and some of these are repetitions.
about
the
building
forming
relationships.
Yeah, that's what all these are.
And there's a lot are asking about John Burnham's scenes, so
About
it's time for that.
About what, his slides?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to tell her that we're going to put them on our website.
Then I'll just. Man, some of these are really. How do you find the appropriate? How much time is dedicated to local stories?
Okay. This could be anybody. Okay, this would be general.
What if you have little or no brand recognition? What are the first steps? That's a good one.
Yeah. I don't know where Kim went.
This is the relationship file.
Okay.
What about a journalism college intern? I think that's a good question to throw out.
I'm giving her some that could be at the end, maybe like we'll say if time at the end.
Does that get 8% charge?
I don't understand what this means.
How do small people get it? I've got several.
How do small people get it?
Yeah, how do small agencies get notice?
Okay.
I don't have that specific question. When sending an email, how do you get attention? Such a But that would be an easy answer.
Oh, no, no. getting a lot of them about relationships. So if you want to look at that stack, that seems to be a hot topic. All right, somebody is asking, John, can we get your slides? Just tell them they're going to be on our website later today. So you got that.
And also, if you can, if Melissa will give us permission to get the sample of the good news releases.
Well, I've got those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that'll all be there.
Yes.
Okay.
So anything that was up here will be there. All right. But there's a lot of them there about relationships.
There's a couple of social media.
So do you still have, in the guide, does it still say beats? Does it still give beats for the Express News?
What I do is refer them to the website for the changes. Yes, it's going to have a list. And it's already out there. You can point to this when you come in because it's now out there to download.
Okay, perfect. And my pen.
All right.
Oh, you've got my pen.
Oh, here, sorry.
My pen.
All right.
Okay. Do you need this?
This
Sorry,
is,
we can see.
that's right. That I'm just going to leave up to you to
Yeah.
put those together. This, I talked to Scott about because they're asking about the overhead with the big gift, and he said to ask John.
Okay, so what?
How would you address folks that say the big give has too much overhead for donation? He said to ask John.
Okay, so John will be, John, and he's ready to answer that question?
No, I haven't showed him that.
Okay.
What are the top 3 things I can do between now? See, this is again.
Okay.
So if they're for certain
Okay,
people.
yeah, I'll ask them.
Here's another one. But that's another thing where if that was on the slides.
That's
Right.
all these.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
those all go together.
Okay.
And then they have a match for the big gift. So maybe John, because John's from the big gift.
Right.
All right. These are for Gonzalo about Spanish.
Okay, good.
You know, so that's Gonzalo. I don't know, more than one can answer that.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, there's a related social media drives, 5 o'clock news. Do they use social media for personal, professional, or both? So these are all like social media questions.
These are the ones you could ask all of them to answer. So they're general.
This has to do with employee media training. How do you train? Crash courses, interview training.
And where's the ones where I said at the end?
I think that was this stack, and she's.
Okay, relation, what?
All right, there was one that I put, there's 2 of them that I wrote at the end if you have time, because they're pretty.
Is that John's?
I wrote at the top at the end. They were general ones.
Okay. Oh, are they these? Yeah, these
Yes.
right here.
These, I mean, if you.
Yeah.
And this, another one, you know, when you're sending an email, how do you capture their attention? Well, you put it in your
Yeah.
signature.
Let's start with that. Yeah.
This is a social media question. If you only could do one, what would you do?
Yeah, more than one.
Yes.
Oh, you really don't want him to do that. Whoever said that doesn't really want that. You really want this.
He did good.
Yeah, he did. He did well.
He did
Yeah,
kind of.
much more concise.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And this poor person, you don't have tech savvy.
Get an intern. I'm going to put that with the get an intern.
And where did John, are you going to show John that question?
I am.
He's right up there.
Which is,
Yeah, he had a bunch of people talking to him. These are. I'm just going to put these down here so if you.
Those are just extras?
They're kind of like prepares.
How do people donate? I'm like, that's not even our deal.
No, but you will get big gift questions.
Yeah. financial advice for Hill Country people.
Yeah, that'd be
Oh, good.
They just embraced that.
Yeah.
So are these the extras?
Yeah.
Okay.
So are these,
Well, how can the Hill Country people get attention on so much in the media?
right,
We've now included all those.
right.
And we have a lot of people that are reading.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Becky Huff came in.
Yeah.
Encapsulating the argument. There's cause for action.
Here comes John. John.
If you run really quick, and somebody's gonna, I've got a question for you about the critics who say the big deal is too much overhead. Answer that. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
we're just left wondering what the angle is.
How would you say?
So-and-so is having an event.
I just wanted to warn you.
But what's the angle?
Good. Yeah. So, yes. There you go. Okay. So run quick. Okay. Here we are.
Here's the media.
It's good? Oh, yeah, this'll film.
Yes. Yes. Those are all essays.
Yes. Yeah, the slides are going to be on our website.
Yeah. Are they there now?
And no, he just put the thing up. I told him to take it out. That it's the media guide is up there.
Okay. And they'll be in the same place?
Yes.
Very good.
Awesome.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, John, are you ready? Okay, so excuse me. So how are we doing out there? Are we about ready to get started? John, are you about ready to get started? Sarah, poke John right behind you and tell him to come up here. He's right behind you. Thank you. So, welcome back from your break. One of the best things about an event like this is meeting with your colleagues, right? I mean, this is good information, but the fact that you're sitting in circles this time, which we haven't always had in the past, I hope that you take advantage of that to pick the brains of the people around you. You know, during our break and even afterwards, exchange business cards with each other because we can learn so much from each other, and we can help solve each other's problems, absolutely. So we're going to get started with the questions, and you guys have come up with some great questions. So we will see if we can get through them, and I'll just ask, the panelists can kind of volunteer. Some of them are sort of assigned, and just be as concise as you can so we can move through that, right? So here's a good question that I know lots of people have. When sending an email, what's the best practice for getting the attention of your audience? And I'm assuming you mean like the media, right? So what's the best way when they're sending an email? What should they do? Like put something in the subject line? Is there something they can say in the subject line that would be helpful? Hold it down. There you go.
Hello.
Oh, this is the magical one.
Yes. I got one. This one's working. Subject line is great. Again, I'm not an attachment girl, so I like just everything in the context of the email message so that I don't have to go through too many additional steps. I always like to know kind of the bullet points of why it's important, what the visuals are, because we're TV, we're online, we're a visual medium. And I think it was Jim, who said, have somebody who is available to speak, and don't pick the same person all the time. Someone on your board who is adept at speaking about that particular focus of your event or, you know, your message might not be the same person as your executive director or your development director. So know 2 or 3 people, if you can, who can speak. So if you pitch it to me and you pitch it to Univision and you pitch it to KENS or OAI, we're not seeing the same person on the screen at the same time. You know, if you have the luxury of a few people who can deliver your message, and outline that in your email as well.
Short, compelling, quick, to the point, and folks lined up, real people that I can interview, not just your ED.
Have a call to action in there. Have something in there that allows me to paint the story of what it would look like rather than an event is occurring or something is happening. Have something that sets up the reporter, you know, and you can talk to John Smith, who has done this many times before and can tell you exactly how exciting it is that this is happening. Something other than the passive news release, something that is a call to action that gives the media an opportunity to follow up on your good thoughts in your email.
Yeah, I guess you guys have answered this, and you're much better experts at this than I am. So I would have a question just to pose back. What constitutes short? I'm just curious because I have a lot of people who short is 500 words, and that's certainly not the volume you're looking for, I'm sure. So what would you say is an optimal amount of space for people to use?
Yeah, it fit on one page, 4 or 5 paragraphs. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. But bullet points.
I love
Yeah. And will you guys
bold
turn all
words.
the microphones on so that we can, you know.
Turn them. Hello. Turn
There
them
you
on.
go.
How do we turn them on?
Thanks.
Hello. I don't know how to turn a
Really?
microphone on.
TV.
Yeah, and I would say bold words on things that you find are important, because a person's eye naturally draws from sort of top left to middle right to bottom left, and so you really want to think about your positioning, and you really want to think about where you're bolding things that draw attention to those spots, because ultimately the vast majority of the content that's being put in anything is irrelevant to what you're actually getting to. And while it's important for you because you're very close to the material, and it's obviously very important and very moving material, for the average reader, they're not spending that much time on it. So you even think about a website, someone's spending an average of less than a minute and a half looking at your website. So less is always more. And in an email, the same thing applies. Less is always more, always just the quick points.
That and just have a direct contact. A cell phone always makes a difference, especially if it's a day of the event. And if you were telling me you have visuals, make sure that those visuals you put on that press release are where you're going to have. Because if we show up to an event and it's not what we're expecting, we're not going to be very happy with that.
And there's another question for you, Gonzalo, so we're down there. Do the people who contact you have to speak Spanish?
No. Thank you for that question, actually, because we get that all the time. We are fluent English speakers. We all have a college education in this country, so we all speak English and can read your press releases. So it's just, you know, obviously if you have a Spanish press release, that will make us happier, but no. English press release perfectly well. We understand that we can go from there.
And, and so if somebody wants to, if you've got a board member or somebody who's going to interview, do you prefer somebody who speaks Spanish if you're going to use them on TV?
On camera, yes. For our purposes, as far as producing the story, yes. As far as the one we're going to interview, the person we're going to humanize the story with, yes, Spanish speakers. But it's not always a no on an English bite. Knowing that we are a highly bilingual community, if I know that I have an expert and he's the only expert, but it's a crucial topic, it's an important topic, I will use the English bite or will translate. We don't like to translate, we don't like to dub stuff, but if it's important, we will do it.
All right, very good. So I do want to say that we had a number of questions asking if John's information that he had on the slides would be available, and that will be available on the website. The media guide is right now available. They've just made it live, so that's available, but we will be adding John's slides and the press releases to the website, so we're good with that. Here's a good question that I know some of you want to know the answer to. If we have to choose just one social media conduit, what would it be? That's a tough question, right?
So I think this is a great question, and Jared and I were actually just speaking about this, and I didn't make this clear earlier when I was asking everybody to raise your hand about how many public relations people you have on staff. It's the intent to show that it's that not a lot of you have that are large enough to have that capability, and so a lot of this stuff may feel overwhelming and feel out of the realm of possibility, right? Because you don't have the staff time to do these kinds of things and to do them well, and you have tons of people telling you need to do this and you need to do that and you need to do whatever. So when it comes to determining a social media platform, it's really about sort of doing some proactive research on what platform best suits your kind of organization. So see sort of where people are hanging out, talking and spending time. If you're a more newsy, kind of we have a lot of things happening organization, that might be Twitter. If you're more of a human interest story and your average donor, your average population is in the 40s, that may be Facebook. If you deal directly with teens and youth, that may be Instagram, that may be Snapchat, something entirely different. But I would say find one, find two, and focus on those. So for example, for us, the Big If, we do have a myriad of different platforms, but we spend the vast majority of our time on Facebook because that's where our donor demographic is, that's where our volunteer demographic is, and that's where our influencers primarily reside. And then we go to Twitter when we have additional manpower. So I think it's important for you to find the one that works for you. Clearly, Facebook is the largest, so that might be the place I would recommend starting. And it's the easiest in terms of time management because you don't have to post more than like once a day. If you want to start experimenting with other platforms, there are great free resources like Hootsuite, which we can also send out, and that allows you to schedule posts. So if you have time on the weekend or you have time on a Monday morning when you're up reading your own news, you can then take that, plug that into that program and tell it, I want it to go out at 3 p.m. on Thursday. Hootsuite? I might not even pronouncing that right. I don't know. I might be butchering that word. Okay. So many of you already know about it. But these are great tools that help reduce the amount of time you actually have to spend doing things. One way that I do this, given that I manage several different accounts and it's only a small portion of what I do during the day, is I use like a Hootsuite and I have a news feed, so like an RSS feed, like a Google Reader of some kind, where news is aggregated in that reader. I go on and I read it for things that might be pertinent to topic areas, quickly scan that material, and if it's relevant, I plug it in. If it's not, I don't. And so that's one way that you can push content out, and that takes very little time. I mean, if you have 30 minutes on a Monday and you're focusing on your platform, you can easily do this and set this for the rest of the week. That would be your first step before you really spend time getting involved in more stuff.
So I'm going to ask this, John, because we got a question. If you could relist some of those social media sources, but you got to do it really quick. Okay, so I want you to name every social media sourse that you know, and I'm going to videotape.
Every social media.
So, okay, so go.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, Yik Yak, Snapchat, WhatsApp, Foursquare. Those are some of the big ones, I guess. Tumblr, if you use Tumblr.
Okay. There are a lot of them. Obviously, there are a lot of them.
MySpace, yeah. If you like to follow bands like Hanson, then MySpace is the avenue for you.
Yes, LinkedIn. You forgot LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. I said LinkedIn. LinkedIn is.
Okay. So.
Rally Point. There you go. That's one that I wasn't familiar with. There.
So let's get back to sort of the touchy-feely stuff. Is we had a couple of questions about relationships. So I know, Bernice, you talked about that, and we talked about building relationships. How does somebody actually build a relationship with your newsroom, and how do they know who to build it with?
Well, and a few people came up to me just a few minutes ago about this very thing. Getting in front of Greg Simmons isn't going to happen that quickly. But I would suggest, at least for my newsroom, if you can call like our receptionist and ask, what are some of the group emails that would be helpful? news@ksat.com, web@ksat.com. Those go to multiple people on our website, in our newsroom, managers, producers, assignments desk. Find out the names of people who work in our newsroom in key roles. And the key roles from my standpoint are assignments editors, the managers like myself, or executive producers, assistant news director, and so forth. And also talk to your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors, because you know, San Antonio is so small, right? It's a small, small town when you cut right down to it. Somebody knows somebody. And I mean, I know probably 5 or 6 people in this room who I didn't realize were going to be here, but I know them either because I'm friends with them or I know them through someone else. I mean, I know someone from someone I know in Colorado. And so you never know who you may be connected to in that 6 degrees of separation. So start talking to people and say, hey, do you know anybody? Your neighbors might know somebody at WAI Radio or KSAT or KENS or KWEX or the paper. So start there. Start with the relationships you already have and see if you can get a few little introductions.
Does anybody else want to say anything about that?
Well, I'm just looking for good stories. So if you bring me good stories, we're going to develop a relationship. Like I know the PR person at the children's shelter, Anais, I can call her, like it's December, the story cupboard is dry, I need some ideas, and she'll email me back 3 different ideas. And that's the kind of relationship that you can develop with a reporter just by bringing good stories over time. That's, I guess, the best way for me.
And one of the things I would also point out is that many of the media outlets' websites have their list of who covers what. So specifically at the Express News, you can look on the website and see which reporter covers what, because those things are always changing. So the more you can look online, obviously you can see on the TV newscast who's sort of doing what. But definitely, you know, investigate that yourself as well. Let's go with this. We talked a little bit about having people be media savvy, be good at interviews, all of that sort of stuff. So we have a request for a crash course in how to give a good soundbite or how to be good on air.
Well, I appreciate that somebody asked about that because that is very, very important. It's not worth your time, and it's certainly not worth our time to have somebody who is not concise with the facts, somebody who doesn't understand the differences between the media. Doing a television interview is far different from doing a radio interview, and it's far different from sitting down with Melissa for a newspaper story. They require certain types of expertise. They require a certain knowledge base. And they also mainly require somebody who's not intimidated by the process. Somebody who, like, for example, like I mentioned before, we need somebody, I will call you up and say, I got your news release. Let me do a quick interview with you right now. And instantly, the tape's rolling, I dub off 5-second sound bites and you're done. Television is obviously going to want to put you on TV. That's a different sort of experience. The newspaper is obviously going to want a more involved, more storified kind of angle. That's a different experience too. And please make sure that whoever interfaces with the media has knowledge in these areas. That is more and more important every day because this is your opportunity to sell yourself. So think about that, be aware of that. If I could put in a quick plug, Kelly Morris, who is a public relations person in town, does fantastic media training. You can ask me, I can put you in touch with her. She does this kind of thing every day. And I would recommend that you seek out Kelly because what she does is outstanding. And what she does will make every one of your organizations better. Not everybody, you know, being able to give a good soundbite or do a good interview is not something that you're born knowing how to do. And I appreciate the fact that people in this room understand that, and I hope you'll carry that ball because it's critical to the success of your organization because you're going to be interfacing with the media. If you weren't, you wouldn't be here. And you want to do it well, and you want to get maximum advantage out of it.
All right.
Actually, speaking of Kelly Morris, she'll be running a workshop for the Big Give essay on the 31st of March on this exact topic. It was a great tie-in. Kelly is fantastic, and so we'll be doing a workshop from 2:30 to 4:30 at the Area Foundation, and that email will go out. And she'll be doing, since it's a large group, this will be an overview, sort of like a bit longer of a crash course, if you will, but she's also available for one-on-one training as well. That's where she works best. That's the optimal, having you and getting you in front of the camera. It is an art, so.
One of the things that I would suggest too, because I teach college students a little bit of how to do this, is record yourself on your phone, right? So just, you know, have somebody interview you and record it on your phone or on another recording device and just listen to yourself. I have terrible habits as a newspaper reporter by trade that I say and and all kinds of things that sound stupid on tape. So record yourself and just listen to it. Let somebody practice with you. All right, so how about this? How much time in a daily newscast is actually dedicated to local stories? So I'm guessing that's we got the microphone down there. Gonzalez, I'm going to start with you. How much time?
I mean, the majority of the newscast is local stories. That's what we do here. We produce local stories. So the goal is to get as many out there as possible in a day. Of course, it all depends on what's going on in the world that day. So that will determine how many local stories we'll have as well.
I feel strongly that a local story is something that people locally are interested in. And you can be a part of that local story, even if it happens to be happening in Kazakhstan. That goes back to what I was talking about before, is making yourself an expert, making yourself available as a resource for topics that are in your area of expertise. If it's in your wheelhouse, it doesn't matter if it happens in Mongolia. It's a local story if people locally are interested in it. And you can help make them interested in it by making sure that the people up here and the local media know that you're the go-to person when it comes to whatever it is. You know, we had the Japanese tsunami, just off the top of my head. I'm sure there's a lot of organizations here who are familiar with the needs and the urgent necessities of people who are involved in situations like that. If that happens, just like the example I gave earlier with the 2 women killed by their husbands in 24 hours, if you hear about that happening here or elsewhere, raise your hand and say, you know something, we have an expert in that area. You know, feel free to call Sarah. She can talk. She's done that. She's familiar with it. That makes it a local story. It may be happening halfway across the world, but it's a local story if you help us localize it.
John, this is a question specifically for you. How would you address folks who say the Big Give has much overhead and charge cost for a donation to make a difference?
Thank you for that question. I feel like this is a question that I get everywhere I speak. So, I'm gonna say a few words, and then Jared also said that he would like to add a couple words if I don't cover them. Is that fair? From the perspective of a donor. So a handful of things. One, last year, the Big Give SA generated $2.1 million from 21,000 donors off of a $68,000 budget. That's a 16-to-1 return on investment. 41% of all gifts that came in that day were brand new donors to organizations. This is an individual who did not give last year and gave again. Gave for the first time. Altogether, the average nonprofit had about 7.5% of that money taken out. Between 2 and 3% of that was credit card, depending on the credit card company, which is a transaction fee you would have on your website on a regular basis. And in addition to that, if you think about taking checks as opposed to doing a credit cards are a convenience fee. People statistically give more money when they give online, unless it's a long-term donor, and we're not necessarily asking you to tap into that. And 2, it takes money for your development staff to take that check, enter that check into a system, and then take that check down to a bank. So you're also losing soft staff time when you're talking about a check. So there's really not much of a difference in that fee percentage. 2.99% is website security fee, so that nothing is stolen from you, and so that the site runs smoothly day of the event. That's what allows us to have all this access. And then that 2.99% also pays for additional webinars, also pays for additional toolkits. And then the last 2% of that is 1% for the Area Foundation and 1% for the San Antonio Nonprofit Council. So the San Antonio Nonprofit Council then takes that 1% and reinvests all of that back into the next year event. So every dollar we raised is back into the 2015 campaign for marketing and for these kinds of trainings. This year we're having 15 trainings altogether, or more, something like that. 15 trainings based on data that we collected that we think are important for you. So these are trainings that are completely free and will serve you year round. So that's a value add for you. The Area Foundation is doing all of the accounting, so that 1% is basically their payout. So last year, and that's off online transactions only, so that means that the Area Foundation made roughly $16,000 altogether for the event. Just the accounting alone ran the Area Foundation $58,000, so that's a net loss of a large amount of money. And then in addition to that altogether, that 7.5%-ish, if you look at that compared to the 41% of new donors brought in, that's 868,000 brand new dollars that were brought in. That's not money that was raised the year before. Those are new donors to organizations, and so that's still an 8-to-1 return on investment. And the idea is that by leveraging media, by paying a little bit of money for this, by reinvesting into these kinds of things, we're getting not only more donors acclimated to your website, or getting them interested in who you are and what you do, but we're also hopefully attracting them to you and then doing return gifts. We've started collecting information on some nonprofits about return gifts. So people who gave for the first time during the 2014 campaign and then have subsequently given a second or third gift. Many of the nonprofits that we've spoken with on this have reported that more than 50% of those donors have given, and many of them have given increased amounts. So now you're talking about brand new money. So you're talking about paying a small fraction of a donation, and now you're talking about 2 or 3 gifts. So in the grand scheme of things, if stewarded well, that is not a net loss, that's a net positive. And if we continue to maintain a ratio between 20 and 40% new donors, then you're looking at a much larger circle of impact. Then you're looking at tools that you have for year-round growth and development. And that's precisely what the overhead, so to speak, goes for. And if that's overhead, then I guess that's overhead. I don't know what overhead actually is at that point if it's not an actual reinvestment back into the cost. Would you like to add some few words, or no? No.
Or you want to just grab the microphone from you right there? That's closer.
Yeah, so there's always a cost of doing business, right? Nonprofits doesn't mean no profit, right? And so how many people are pointing fingers at your organization and saying, like, what do you mean it costs to do this to feed the homeless or, to deal with an abuse shelter, right? We all have costs built into our programs. And this is another program run by a nonprofit, and so they've got to make it work. But I think we also have to put things into perspective. So how many people in the room do golf tournaments? How many people do dinners, galas, luncheons? What, the expense ratio is about 40% at least. Some of you lose money on those events, right? So for 7.5%, right, versus something, and that's not even counting all of the unpaid man hours and women hours, excuse me, that go into putting this, that we don't pay out. So when you think of taking all of your staff away for what I would consider somewhat non-mission critical work to do fundraising, right, then the costs really add up. So I think 7.5% versus the return is a drop in the bucket. That's also one of the things that I love about this and why Tesoro funds this, is because this is a great way to leverage, again, small dollars for a bigger return.
John, just another quick question. If you could quickly say, explain the match for nonprofits in using the Big Give.
So this won't be quick. This will be, you'll have to give me at least a minute and a half on this. Scott, do you want me to get into the new thing that we're about to release on matches, or just pass that for now? Sure, okay, sure, we'll go ahead. So the Big Give SA, all of you are aware that you're eligible for prize money, correct? Right? So that's the point. We leverage donations, we get prize money, and many times that prize money then over-counters the fees that were taken out. There's another component, there's a match component, and we have some foundations, some business support, people who have added in match dollars. These are for specific nonprofits, and you will have been contacted more than likely by that foundation individually. A prime example is Choose to Succeed and the Brackenridge Foundation, both of which are partners, both of which are investing $100,000 in match money to the nonprofit of their choice. Each of them support between 4 and 12 nonprofits, so those agencies are eligible for an additional $25,000. Okay. That money is any match money, any prize money, none of that has fees taken out of it. So that's 100% you. In addition to those sorts of things, we've had this year a lot of organizations that have had high dollar matches that they've acquired on their own. An example is the Clubhouse has a $10,000 match by Jack Richmond. KIPP Academy has acquired another $20,000 match outside of this, and I'm sure many of you in the room have somewhere between $2,500 and $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 in match money. If you inform us of that match, once again, no fees are taken out. If you inform us of that match between now and April 10th, we can also put that sponsor, if they want, on our sponsors form so that they get recognition for it. And then once you hit that goal, whatever that stipulation is, and we have to have a sheet of paper that tells us something like, tells us that the breakdown, tells us when we know, like something binding that we can turn to if we're audited and say, this is what we have. We will then add that money back onto your Give Day site. So let's say you have a $10,000 match. Once you raise $10,000, your Give site will go from $10,000 to $20,000 because you'll have that additional amount of money accounted for on the site. And we provide the transaction sheet to the match, the person who wanted the match, so that they can see all the online transactions, so that you don't have to handle that. But they pass the check directly to you, so it doesn't come through us. Does that all make sense? Do I need to be more clear with any of that? Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Very good. We may come back to some questions for that, but let's work on this. I lost where I was. Man, so many cards. We have a number of nonprofits from the Hill Country area, so they're not right here in downtown San Antonio. How can some of those outer areas get the attention of San Antonio media?
I mean, for us, it's no problem going out there, just as long as we, it's something that's interesting for us, and then it's relevant to our viewers, and we know that we're going to get a story out of it. Meaning, if I send a reporter or a crew out to the Hill Country, I need to make sure that my time is going to be worth it. So making sure that you have everything ready to go for us, the interviewee, the visuals, all that's going to make a difference whether I send a crew out there or not.
Please.
For us, similar, but we do also, and I keep pushing our website and our social media channels. Those are great resources because they're forever. They last forever. So one of the things that I know we've talked with the Big Give folks about doing as part of our commitment to the Big Give is doing some online components that take Kendall County, for example, and the organizations in Kendall County that are going to be participating in the Big Give. We'll put together kind of a round robin for our online of a map that includes little links to all of those organizations so that people can find out more about them. If there are pictures that we can use to build out that story, then we can use our television opportunity to push viewers to our website so that they can learn about the organizations within their own communities that are going to be benefiting from this 24-hour outreach. And it allows us to spotlight those in a very efficient way, and it also gives us a chance to kind of hit different areas of our community that we don't always get out to, especially some of the really rural areas. I know Kerr County is going to be involved, Karnes County, and those are, yeah, we got cars and we can drive there, but we have a very big area of our community that we want to serve. So we can do a lot through our online. Same thing with social. If we know that an organization in Karnes and they have a Facebook page that we can build a little Facebook post on, put a couple of pictures from their organization and what their mission serves, and tag their page, then they can start sharing that too. Other organizations that maybe partner with them in different ways throughout the year can start sharing that. And that's where the whole social sharing component can really be to your benefit.
Well, in the Express News, we have 4 community newspapers, and let's see, Southside Reporter, Northeast Herald, Northwest Light, which is the Helotes, Gray Forest and surrounding area, and then Conexión, which is our Spanish language paper. So all the contact information for those papers is in the media guide. And we also have mysanantonio.com, which is the online free newspaper. So we do stuff all over the area in that section there. So check it out.
You know, we do our interviews generally on the phone, so you can be on Mars as far as I'm concerned. It really doesn't make that much difference where you are. But there has to be one of two things. There either has to be something very unique that's Hill Country-ish or Eagle Ford-ish or something. There has to be a response to some unique and interesting challenge that would be of interest to people throughout the area, or it has to be some event or some charity or some activity that is of interest to people across the area. We have, you know, a lot of news. We have a short time to give it. Story count is very important. So we try to avoid having things that are narrowly tailored. We're broadcasting, we're not narrowcasting. We try to avoid having things that are narrowly tailored to one specific area. If we talk about a school district, we'll probably talk about Northside, Northeast, or SISD. Nothing against Harlandale. It's just that Northside is bigger. And we'll go for, I mean, that's a good example. We'll go for a larger serving catchment area just simply because we try to be as universal as possible. So sell us that hook. Either you know, we are doing something that is uniquely Karnes County. Ever since the Eagle Ford began, we've had big problems with X, and now we're dealing with that. That's interesting. Or we just happen to be located in Bernie, but we serve the entire area, and this is of interest to people throughout the entire metro. Either of those two are great. Where you're located doesn't make that much difference.
One of the things I would remind you, too, is that for many of you who are in small towns, I live in Bernie. There's a newspaper in Bernie. Actually, there's 2 newspapers in Bernie. Community newspapers are doing well, so don't forget about them. In fact, oftentimes they will run your press release as is. You may know if you're in a small area, so follow all those good rules for writing, because they don't have sizable staffs either. So don't forget about them. The Bernie Star, I'm on the advisory board. You know, send press releases to them. The other newspaper too. So how about this? How do nonprofits get sponsorships in fundraising events? I know that's a different kind of animal for TV stations and also for the Express News. How do they actually get connected with you on a sponsorship? Gonzalo, do you have that? You want to start down there?
Okay. You can have both of them in case one more.
Well, we actually have a new community relations manager. Her name is Cristina Vasaldua. She's actually very involved in the community. She used to work in the city council, so she's very, very knowledgeable about the community. And so anytime you have any of those requests, you can filter those through her. She makes all those happen. If you don't know who she is or you want to get a hold of her, you can always call the newsroom and say, who's your community relations manager? And we'll make sure we get in touch with her. But she makes it. And I also wanted to get out there, we're not only TV, we have 6 radio stations in town. So we now have one news director that manages both. So we're constantly working with each other and sharing information. So the events and the stories will get out on all platforms, including radio. So if you're reaching out to one, you're reaching out to all of them.
Yeah.
We have our KSAT community group, which I kind of went through, and there are a number of us who are involved in that. And we do different events throughout the year. Each month we have a different event. May is the Big Give Month. But one of the things that we are trying to do, especially in the month of December, is with our holiday helpers, we're trying to spotlight smaller, perhaps lesser known nonprofits that always have a call to action that we can, and we do little PSAs, and there's a great response to that because we put our anchors and reporters out front on those to kind of connect with the community in a visual way. People, oh yeah, that's that Tim Gerber or whatever. But those are good opportunities. And if you get in touch with the KSAT community group and write this down, Josie Rios is a great point of contact for that. You can find out a lot of information from her on how your organization can be nominated for our monthly Spotlight Award. And we do a Spotlight deal where we run PSAs. We do your call to action. If you're trying to get, you know, diapers and food and clothing for kids, or you're trying to get tickets to your golf tournament or gala, those things, we'll do PSAs and we'll put information on our website, on our KSAT community page. She can give you all of that. So Josie Rios, jrios at ksat.com.
And that's pretty similar at most of the TV stations in San Antonio. It's kind of a similar process. And community relations, that's the term to remember when you're talking about trying to reach out for sponsorship, so community relations. Here's one, we could probably start with Bernie on this, but how do you find out the best times to contact media organizations? So let's just run down the row and tell us, what time of day do you want to get something?
Not an hour before a newscast, because that's, you know, busy time. I would say if you're going to have if you're holding a press conference, we're kind of 10:30 to 11 o'clock in the morning is good, because that's sort of, we're getting our day going and we can get people out, and there's still time before the 5 o'clock show or the 6 o'clock show. But I will reiterate what Jim has said a number of times. If there is an event, if there is a news event happening in this community and you have an organization that has a vested interest in how that impacts the community, start making calls immediately. And call anybody you can. Call the front desk, 351-1200, and say that you want to speak to somebody on the assignments desk, that you've got a story possibility that could tie into the big story of the day. That's an important message that you are uniquely qualified to deliver. So that's kind of an anytime it happens sort of deal. But also don't take it personally if we don't answer the phone right away or can't get right out to your event. It just sort of depends on what's going on in the day.
And before you hand the mic off, Bernie, is there a certain day of the week that's kind of a slow news day, as it were? So, like, should we all schedule our events on Sunday? Because
Actually, weekends are horrible because we have fewest number of people working on the weekends. So we really have to be choosy of what we cover on a weekend. But that's where you can be your own news service. That's where you can take, if we can't get out to your 5K, but it's a good turnout, beautiful day, lots of runners, all their purple T-shirts or whatever. Take 10 pictures, send them to us with captions. Write up something about how many people participated, that Brackenridge Park was awash in a sea of purple, that, you raised $15,000 for your organization. Send that into the website or send that to us and ask to be make up an album on Facebook or a slideshow or an article on ksat.com. Those kinds of things we can do, and we don't have to do them right that second. So that's an opportunity for you to be your own news service and get that message out that way.
Yeah, we're also on a skeleton crew on Saturdays and Sundays too. So, but I mean, we have to pick and choose which events we cover. But morning is really better. We've moved our deadlines up till 5 p.m. So everything in the morning is better for us in terms of when to notify us.
We want to hear from you when we're looking for your material, and that's up to you to determine when that's going to be. Like I mentioned before, you kind of need to hear the grass grow. You kind of need to know what the press of news is in that particular day. Remember that our prime time is in the morning. Our major newscast is from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. in the morning. So we do a lot of what we refer to as evergreen. That's probably you, unless your building is on fire or they found a body in your building, which I hope they didn't. You will probably be evergreen, which means that we're looking for material of interest that is timely, that can be in that 4-hour Charity McCurdy's morning newscast. So try to tailor that accordingly. If you've got an event going or there's something happening that day, we may end up talking to you the day before, and we may be saving it and we'll use it later today. There's going to be a big event featuring Haven for Hope, that kind of thing. Frequently, we cover things before they happen, just simply because we like to kind of be ahead of the game. That's an area of advantage we can take. And also, we can take advantage of the fact that our prime time is between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. So think about that. Think about, how you could become an enterprise evergreen piece for the morning that your event or the person you want, whatever you want to talk about is happening. And then go ahead and pitch us a couple days in advance. If it's happening on Thursday, call us on Tuesday and say, hey, we'll be available tomorrow if you want to talk to us. We've got this happening on Thursday. This person's available on Wednesday. You can talk to them. We'll save it for Thursday morning, and that'll work out great. So that's, just kind of learn the cycle is what, as I mentioned earlier in my spiel, learn kind of the rhythm of kind of how the various media operate and the different media operate to different rhythms. But it's kind of your responsibility to figure out what those are and work with them.
So the beauty of social media is that social media doesn't sleep. So really, if you're using tools and you're thinking about scheduling or you're thinking about doing stuff, you can put information out all the time. I wanted to really quickly just to get a sense before I mention the next little thing. How many people in the room have an organization with 2 people or fewer? Okay. So a decent number. So for you in particular, and for anybody with 4 and under as well, or even, it's key to prioritize. So what I'm saying may not work for you. You may want to follow other people who are doing things on a very small level. I wanted to give a quick example of how the process, an actual example of how the process of doing small level engagement can work and work on your timetable to your advantage. So CAMP, how many of you are familiar with CAMP, the nonprofit in town? So CAMP does not have a massive staff either. And what they were able to get on News 4 simply by having a conversation over a period of time and following up with the individual who runs their social media. So I guess News 4 reposted something that Big Give SA was doing. Camp sort of thanked them for it, started a conversation about what areas they cover and you could talk about. And the news reporter was like, thank you. And they got connected that way, sent in an email, and then they're on the News 4 station. So this is a process that takes minimal time for a lot of output, in the sense that they went from getting social media recognition to getting FaceTime recognition on air. And these are how you need to sort of build these relationships accordingly. And another really easy way to do this, to get your name out there, to engage with influencers, to find outlets to be retweeted, to be shared, is by following hashtags. Is everybody familiar with hashtags and what purpose they serve? And sort of indexing. So a hashtag, whenever you see somebody put a hashtag on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, it's essentially indexing. It would be like going to the appendix of a book, and you're able to go back to the page number, and it's marking down that conversation, but it's accruing it over everybody that's sort of having that conversation, so that you could, in the search bar on Facebook or the search bar on Twitter, you can put hashtag, and then you could say BGSA 2015, for example, and see anybody who's posted material on the Big Give SA in the last however long. You keep scrolling down and find more and more. And so it's important to cover stories that are breaking from their channels in your area of focus. So, for example, domestic violence. If there's something happening on social media, conversations are occurring, you can search for those conversations by using these hashtag functions and then start talking to people about them, because that then is tying you into what's happening, and then talk to the news station about that. And then this is an opportunity for them to see that you are, in fact, interested in engaging and interested in being an expert in the field. And this, over time, builds up the opportunity for you to be seen as having that opportunity. And so this is how you even identify whether or not these stories are relevant currently in your city, in your country, in your state, whatever, and how you can capitalize on them in a greater conversation, but then eventually tying into what the bigger media outlets are doing.
Gonzalo, do you want to talk about the time of day or the days of week?
It really just what they all said. I just wanted to add along with the pictures, we all have iPads and iPhones. If you're at an event and we can't make it, if you send us a video, a couple of clips, that will also make it in our social media and our website. So that's also material that is valuable to us. So keep that in mind when you have those events.
And I'm going to do you all a favor. How do you shoot video? Not like this. Like this, right? So turn your phone this way because it doesn't feel natural, but shoot video like this. You're welcome.
Thank you.
So here's another question. What do you suggest for organizations that have little to no brand recognition? Like, what's their first steps to building the relationship, to getting their information out there? Just a quick tip. Anybody a quick tip?
I mean, I think that all that we discussed already, the social media and the online, that's a great tool to start getting that out there, and basically building those relationships with the news media by knowing who they are and what they do. So making sure that you reach out to the correct person. For example, a story that you may see on my station may not apply to KSAT, but knowing the difference in those two coverages and the way we put those two stories together will help you reach out to the correct medium as far as getting that information out there and building that relationship.
I would say in terms of brand recognition, gone are the days, and being completely honest, gone are the days where you can just plug in a Facebook page, plug in a Twitter page, and feel like you're going to have tons of followers, right? You get sold that all the time, that this is what's attracting young people, this is what's doing this and that, and that's not true, certainly not true, especially for Facebook, where the audience is now skewing older and older. So it's not necessarily an immediate avenue. Just because you post something about needing money doesn't mean that 350,000 other people aren't posting that per minute about needing money as well. So the point of that is to say that you need to be very clear. And I would apply an 80-20 rule. Don't just ask for money. If you just ask for money, it's going to be lost in noise, it's going to be lost in clutter, and that's only going to inhibit your brand recognition. You build brand recognition online by engaging with people in one-on-one settings, by retweeting, by sharing what people are doing, by talking, by having a face, the same way you build brand recognition in day-to-day conversations with individuals, right? Like, I only know some of the nonprofits in this room because I've had a face-to-face conversation with you. And now when I have somebody who comes to me and wants to talk, like, I can say, oh yeah, you might be interested in this organization or this organization. The same thing applies through social media. It's no different. It's just another means of communication. So by talking with people, by having people who aren't necessarily your page by having friends and family share that information too about what's happening. That's the way you spread that, and that's the way you develop that sort of slowly. And you also focus. You don't say, well, everybody sort of naturally wants to target everybody, right? Like, I've got something that is for everybody. You know, I'm a nonprofit. Like, I want to reach to everybody. That doesn't work. You know, I mentioned earlier somebody like a Mark Graban who will be giving a presentation, somebody like a Kelly Morris, somebody who is very specific at what they do and very good at what they do will help wedge open that niche area for you. And there are plenty of people there engaging in that conversation that are interested in what you're doing, that you don't need to focus on the gigantic greater picture. So identify where that is for you, whatever you're going to engage with and run with it. And that's really how you slowly build that brand recognition. There's no magic pill. There's nothing that's going to be like an ice bucket challenge for you. You know, that's a once in a lifetime thing. It's not for everybody. And so don't ever focus on doing that to build your recognition. Build it one person at a time. If you don't have the time as a company to do it, have your donors, have your volunteers, have your supporters. Find social media igniters, people who are young, who cannot, or not even people who are young, but people who may not have the financial means to donate to you right now, but they can, in fact, use social media as a disruption tool and spread information about what you do.
We don't cover existence. We cover activity. We cover things that happen. We cover things that are done. So the best way that you can get your name recognition is essentially by doing something. This is another area where you can get good name recognition, as I mentioned before, by providing yourself as a resource for discussing events that are happening not just in this area but all over the world. Becoming known as the go-to person for the media is probably, I think, the most effective way to build a brand, to build an identity, to build the fact that people know who you are, and the people will respect you because you are recognized as an expert by the media. And that, I think, still counts for a lot. And that sets you up as an organization that people will want to donate to, people will want to be a part of, if they know that the individuals who are in charge of it are the ones that the media turn to for expertise on an issue. I can't think of a more exalted, respected position to be in than that. So that would be what to do something to make sure that your people are known, make sure your mission is known, and to offer yourself as a resource to the community.
Just find the compelling human story in your nonprofit and call me.
Yeah, ditto on all of that. You are the best person to figure out how to spread your message and what your message is, but be authentic about it. Be real with who you are and what your mission is, and how you want people to know you. And it'll happen. It has to happen organically, though.
I think we may have sort of heard the answer to this question, but I suspect several people are thinking about it. If you're not technically savvy or you don't have the capability to really use all this social media, I think John said that find people in your organization, right? Find volunteers and things like that who can do that. Somebody else asked the question similarly and said, so do you think interns would be an asset? Yes. Let's just say yes, right? Yes.
I love interns. I was an intern. I got my job because I was an intern. Interns are great. But don't make no mistake. Interns make mistakes. Trust me, I was one of them. I can't even imagine what would have happened in my life if I had had social media when I was 19. No filter. So just understand, and we have interns, and we entrust them with a lot, with our brand, but only after they have been trained. So you have to commit to the training, and you have to commit to what your expectation is, especially with a volunteer who is young and who may be very enthusiastic and wants to do all those wonderful things to be the next ice bucket challenge, and if I just press send, that might happen, and then you don't want it to blow up in your face. So just be really, really smart and really, really patient, and be mindful that enthusiasm in a young person is exciting and wonderful, but it is fraught with disaster.
Were you going to say something else?
Did you guys have anything?
So interns, right? How many of you have an intern running your development staff? Don't have them run your marketing staff either. Just because you don't necessarily understand social media to its fullest capacity doesn't mean an intern does because they're young. It's a huge mistake you can make. You're not going to develop a sort of, I mean, certainly they can and they will be a support and an asset, but it has to be used properly, and training is key to that. You're not going to turn over the keys to your entire marketing department, essentially your social voice, your brand online, to somebody who has no experience doing that. Just because they grew up using it, they may have a leg up in terms of understanding all the ins and outs, but they are not an expert in the field. So you have to have some way of monitoring them, some way of tracking that. I've seen too many agencies use an intern and just say, hey, we're going to have you do social media, and it's going to be great. It's not, most of the time, it's not going to be great. It's going to be mediocre at best. And so the intern will never know the organization as well as you do. It will never know the organization as well as somebody on your staff does, as well as a passionate 20-year supporter of your organization. And you also can't expect an intern who's 19 to be able to properly engage with people who are in their 40s and 50s, if that's your average demographic. It's never going to work, and so you have to have structure to it. So, I mean, definitely use them. They're a component. I have wonderful interns that work for me, and we have wonderful interns that work for the Big Give SA, and they do fantastic work, but it has to have some sort of oversight to it. Really find their strengths and use it that way.
Yeah, and I was going to say that part of an internship is their learning too, right? So we expect them to have a relationship with people who know more than they do, and you're guiding them. So that's really, you know, it's a partnership that way. This is sort of related to that. Are the panelists, are you guys using social media personally and professionally? Are they the same thing? How does that work? Because that's actually kind of an evolving area of social media now, about whether or not you make people tweet only professional stuff or only from your professional account. How's that working?
And in my case, I mean, I have two social media accounts. I have my personal one and I have a professional one. And for the majority of my on-air staff will have, you know, they have their personal one, but ultimately they know that they carry the brand 24 hours a day. So it doesn't matter what time or what they're posting, they are representing the brand. So it just depends on the personal choice for my staff. We give them the option of having a personal or just having one account. For me personally, I like to keep those two separately. And, you know, I do have multiple accounts, and, you know, I keep up on Instagram and I keep up on Twitter and Facebook. So to me, it's just easier for me to just kind of manage those two. And since I do post for our, you know, newsroom account as well, so I have to kind of, you know, juggle those as well. But it's a personal choice, I think.
Same thing. I think that I have separate pages. So I have my own, and then I have the ones that I work with. Now, however, I'm very targeted about on my personal one, the sorts of things that I'll talk about. You know, I'll talk about some stuff that's happening in San Antonio. I'll talk about human rights, and I'll talk about sort of public health issues. Like, those are the three things that you can sort of expect on my profile. Now, that often relates to what's happening within the work I'm doing. And so what I'll sometimes do is share what I'm doing from work also over to my personal one, but I will not do the opposite. So because that way I keep them separate, but I'm also sharing information that's relevant.
Yeah, I have personal accounts, but mainly it's I put news on there because I think that's the reason people follow me, is because they want that. So that's normally what's on there.
I've got Facebook and Twitter, and both personal and professional, the same one. Post stories.
I have personal Twitter and Facebook, and I started our KSAT Facebook and Twitter, and I used to manage both equally, sort of, but now I don't because that's too much and it would hurt my head. So my personal Twitter I do kind of the same thing. I will take something maybe that KSAT News posts, put it on my Facebook page, or put it on, you know, tweet it out. I don't do the opposite, but you know, and as far as our personalities on the air, that everybody has a Facebook page, and most of them have Twitter. They sometimes will post personal things or professional things. They'll post something about another reporter's story if they like it, or they're interested in it, or they know something that they're writing about. But my only directive to them is be real about who you are. So if they're going, and don't be dumb. So don't post dumb things, you know. But they, you know, our anchors will post things about their private lives. And if they are comfortable with that, that's fine. I don't demand that they do so, and I don't tell them that they're not allowed to. But they have to be authentic about it, and they have to be, you know, rated G.
And, you know, we are seeing some change in that, which is, you know, media evolves, of course. And so it used to be that you only did professional account. Now there's a more blend. I know Evan Smith, who's editor of the Texas Tribune, said he has unleashed his staff because there was a time when they only did from their Texas Tribune account and he wanted to control what they said. And still some companies have to approve tweets, which a little bit seems like it's defeating the purpose of getting stuff out there quickly. But Evan says now he tells his people, I trust you, you're professional, build our brand. So build your personal brand and build our brand. So it really is about not doing something dumb. That's pretty much, that should be your social media policy. Don't do something dumb. So John, this is another big give question. What are the top 3 things that I can do now, between now and May 5th, to maximize my organization's contributions, chance for contributions? Top 3 things.
Top 3 things? Well, so we talked about a lot of these at the beginning in January, and the same things still apply. How many of you have talked to your board about this? I don't see every hand up. So that's definitely number 1. If you haven't, so you may be a small organization, but that's where the power and the key lies, right? Your board is your board for, in somewhat of a reason, because they're connected. So that's one thing. Your board, we found that boards that were engaged produced organizations that were 4 times more likely to finish in the top quarter of all participants because your board knows what's happening and they can help spread the information. If you don't have the staff, those are people that are ready and available and should be willing to help share the information. So do that. How many of you have set a strategy? Even fewer of you. So that's one thing I would do. Set a clear strategy. It doesn't have to be, I want to raise X amount of money. It can be any number of things. Like, I want to bring in X number of donors. I want to bring in X number of donors from this general area. I want to open up a social media account. Any and all of those things directly contribute to success. We know organizations that set goals were 3 times more likely to finish in the top quarter. And that goal did not have to be financial. So setting a plan, it's like anything. Setting a calendar, setting a plan is ultimately going to be a guideline, a roadmap to success. And it's going to incorporate everything you sort of want to do. It's very proactive. It's not reactionary. It's not happening in the moment. It's happening sort of, so you know, you're talking about sending out emails to your staff and your board about sending emails out to other people and provide them a template for that. You know, we have those resources available. If they're not currently up, they should be currently up as of like yesterday, but if they're not, they'll be up by the end of this week. Like email templates and PSA templates and stuff like that you can use. It's a very easy source, that takes up very minimal time. Provide it to your staff, provide it to your board to send it out. And then 3, I would really start focusing on identifying people who are capable of spreading that word for you. So, you know, sort of the idea of unleashing, right? It's not just about you. You know, you may have, if you're lucky, 4,000 or 5,000 followers on social media. If you're a small organization, you may have a handful, a few hundred. But that number doesn't necessarily limit your capabilities. It gives you opportunity for growth. And so you can use, you know, you may not have a ton, but you may also be able to find an influencer who's interested in what you do. You know, there's a great group in town called the Mommy Blog, like a mommy blog group that does a lot of things with kids, for example. Or you might find people within your own staff who are staff or volunteers or family members who are very active. And they can really carry that torch for you. So getting that information out on your behalf. Those are really the big 3 key things that you need to do, that everybody needs to do in order to succeed. There's, you know, a number of other things. And I would also, just as a 4th one, attend the remaining workshops we have. You know, if you have, I mean, we've had great turnout. I mean, we were talking about this the other day. We've touched almost 2,000 people at this point now. Or, yeah, around 2,000 people already with the workshops this year. Most of those are obviously repeat. But last year, we were getting 75 people at workshops. This year, we're either having to do double or cap at like 300 or 400 people because everybody's so interested. Attend those. Those will give you those tips and tricks, and they'll give you the connections to the speakers who could potentially help spread your word as well.
This is a question we got from a number of people in some different ways, but the gist of it is small organization. How do our small organizations get your attention? And we've sort of talked about this a little bit, but we've got like a Christian school and an animal group, and how are they really going to get your attention if they're quite small and haven't had a lot of attention?
You want to? I've said it before, I'll say it again, be your own news service. If you especially if you've got an animal organization. I mean, we love dogs and cats and ducks and horses and stuff like that. The pictures go viral, videos go viral, and we're happy to get those, especially if you send us something and say, gosh, look at this cute little dog we're fostering right now. We're looking for a foster mother. I mean, we get a lot of that, but some of those really do kind of bubble to the top, and we'll put that up on our Facebook or whatever, and let us know if you are participating in the Big Give. I'm assuming that everybody here is. If you're here because of that. Because then we can be smart about pulling those in and scheduling different posts to push out onto Facebook or web or Twitter or whatever. And I'll take a lot of those kinds of things and put those out on my Facebook. Now it's not like I'm a big popular girl or anything, but I do know other people, and I have a fairly good circle of influence, and I imagine that you do too. So that kind of goes back to what John was saying, is use your circle of influence. Even if they are not directly involved in your organization, they are directly involved with you, or they're involved with your kid, or they're involved with your church, or they're involved with your worker, your coworkers. So use your circle of influence, and if you know that John, who sits in the cubicle next to you or next to your daughter, is really into animal issues, then get your daughter to talk to him about being a person who puts your message out for you, and that'll help spread that.
If you have an interesting story, if you have a hook, if you have a compelling tale to tell, it doesn't make any difference how big your organization is. Everybody's email is the same size. And if you have a story that I think that my listeners or my viewers online are going to be interested in, that's all it takes. I had some chats with a couple of people during the break from small organizations, and we just kind of brainstormed, hooks and ideas and ways you can get your message out. A compelling story is a compelling story. Whether you are a 1 or 2 person shop or whether you're Microsoft, whatever it is that you have to talk about, if it's interesting, it'll break through. So just sell the content, sell the emotion, sell the compassion, sell the compelling nature of the story, and you'll be able to break through. It'll be easier than you think.
You want to go?
Yeah, no,
Okay, so here, this is a little related. I'm sorry, John, were you going to?
Oh, no, I didn't know. No, I was just going to say you can also write yourself, too. Nowcast SA is a great community blog source you can use, and it's a nonprofit that's participating. That you can write every day if you want to about your organization, and they have a reach to people within the city. Or the Rivard Report, you can write an article for the Rivard Report and submit it, and the Rivard Report will edit it and publish it if you follow their guideline rules. So there are outlets that you have, and yes, those things take time, and yes, you have a small staff, but if it's really important to you, you can find time to do that.
This is a little related to that, and we sometimes hear this criticism when we're talking about the media. This is somebody who works for conservative political organizations and says sometimes they have prominent national and state figures speaking to their group, but they don't see a lot of interest from the media. So is there a media bias against groups?
There's a media bias against boring.
Not that your group is boring, she's just saying.
I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, and it doesn't matter. I can tell you why there's no TV stations here, including my own. This is interesting here, but it's not visual. That's the same thing with every, person who comes and does a speaking engagement and stands in front of a podium. That isn't visual, and I'm a visual medium. So I have to be very cognizant of what it is that people are going to see on my TV. That doesn't mean that a story about that event won't end up online or that it won't be mentioned on the morning show as this is happening today. We do a lot of community calendar kind of, notices and notifications and mentions that way. But bringing in a big name or a big name to you who might not be a big name to me or might not be a big name to the greater San Antonio DMA, it's great for you, but it doesn't do anything for the general viewership of this community. So don't be offended that we don't come to your luncheon or to your speaking engagement because, whoever head of whatever organization is going to be speaking, it's boring TV.
Well, and I know the Express News gets accused of being liberal sometimes conservative. I know that if I turn a story in, if I'm writing a story that's controversial, that has two sides, and if I turn a story in with just one side, quotes from one side, I'll get the story back from my editor and say, balance this. That's just what happens.
I have a unique issue because the radio station that I work for runs Rush Limbaugh, and it has a tendency to be, perceived as being conservative. We're trying to deal with that because we don't find that to be as inclusive as we would like it to be, but we still have a perception of having a conservative bias. That doesn't extend to what we do. I don't even listen to those shows. I'm too busy. But, I agree with Bernice. I mean, people standing behind a podium talking politics is just not very interesting. It's not fun. It's not compelling. The people he or she is talking to probably were at the meeting, the people who really care about this. So, we'll cover issues as opposed to covering individuals talking about issues, especially now that the legislature is in session. We talk a lot about kind of what are the bills that are being discussed and what are the pros and cons and what, are the what are both the Democrats and Republicans and libertarians and everything else saying about it. But, I find, Newt Gingrich coming to town and standing behind a podium and speaking, or, somebody on the other side, just not to be very compelling. I mean, nothing against it, but it's just not what we do. I mean, there may be media outlets who are interested in that, but that just doesn't strike my fancy as being something that, mom with two kids in the back seat driving their kids to school in the morning is really going to be fascinated by. They want your story. They want human stories. They want real people. They want to find out what people like them are doing in their community and how they're reacting and dealing with the same challenges they have. So, I mean, I tire of the liberal conservative, you're too biased this way or that way. I mean, if you accuse me of being biased, that says a lot more about you than it does about me. And we just try to be interesting, and we try to be fun, and we try to talk to as many people as possible in an inclusive nature. And if you think we're biased, that's your problem.
The beauty of this is that you have a thing called the internet that also doesn't distinguish anymore. So if you have a great national speaker coming in, that national speaker likely has a large audience themselves. And so your best option may be to plug it through them. And there is a circle of people out there, I guarantee you, for different kinds of speakers, there is a circle of people out there who love everything that person does, regardless of who they are, and they'll spread that information for you. So that you have opportunities now, and if you keep going to the same well and the same well keeps rejecting you for whatever reason, whether it be some perceived bias, whether it be that that's not interesting content for them, it's not the kind of thing they do, then why do you keep going back to that well? Like, you have so many opportunities. I said earlier that the average American goes to 4 or 5 different sources for news and for different things, and there are hundreds and thousands of different outlets out there that you can tap into that may not be WAI, that may not be KSAT, it may be a big-time blogger who is a conservative in this example, or it may be somebody else that you could potentially plug that information to and reach an audience that's going to really care about what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's not good TV. It's not something we can relate. And do not get offended. If we're not interested in that one, don't pass another story because we said no to that one. So just always be able to come back and reach to us, and if it's something that it's compelling and it's human interest, then we'll go after it. But speaker standing, not good, no.
We're almost done with the questions. A yeoman's job. Yes, I won't forget that, Ginger. She's waving at me back there. Somebody asked for John to repeat the aggregator, and I think we're talking about Rebel Mouse. I think that was probably the question they had. You were interested in the one page where you saw all the different little pieces. So, and you showed Herman somebody, right? Anyway, Rebel Mouse, I think, is what we were talking about. It's
the screens are up. Yeah, Rebel Mouse is what it's called. There are a ton of other ones, things like Scoop It, things like Clip It. They all do the same thing. Essentially, some of them will take, you have to find out which one's best for you. You can just Google search for them. The Rebel Mouse is one of the easiest ones to use. It's got a free starter. Rebel Mouse.
Yeah.
Rebel Mouse, sorry, if the word sort of.
R-E-B-E-L, mouse.
Yeah, and it'll either have manual functions where you can plug in news stories that you're interested in, or it'll have functions that you can track people that you're currently following, and it'll pull some of their most like retweeted, most shared stuff, and it'll put it onto your site. You know, a lot of people will use these kinds of things for visual appeal because it's much more visual. It attaches images to it, makes it more headliney, more newsy, and then we'll click out from there.
Well, good job, everybody. You all have done great questions, great answers. I'm exhausted. I don't know if you are, but we're going to need a nap after this. I'm on spring break, so I can take a nap later. Evaluations, do not forget to fill out your evaluations. We do take these very seriously. The staff or the volunteers from AWC, they go through all of them and they consider how we will build the program that we do again. So let me just take a minute to thank a number of people. So first of all, our panelists for all of their contribution. They've all got busy days, so we appreciate that. Also, Lupe Rodriguez, who was the event coordinator at this beautiful venue. So thank you, Lupe. Also, the San Antonio Nonprofit Council for the Big Give, right, San Antonio. So thank you. Tesoro, thank you. And for the chapter of Women in Communications, all of the great volunteers who put this together. And so, I don't know, a job well done, everyone. Thank you. So we're ending just a couple of minutes early, which means that you can try to tackle each one of these individuals before you leave. But they have to wait for a photo, so they can't go anywhere for a minute because we have to take a photo. And then you can rush the stage, just like in your concert days.
Open it up to everybody, and you get a lot of bad information. Yeah. That's the other part. Yeah. Well, it's interesting to be